The universe did not scream when Whis died. It merely shuddered. A sudden, terrifying hollow opening in the chest of existence, as if a vital organ had been surgically removed from the cosmos. The stars of Universe 7 flickered, dimming in unison, mourning the loss of their attendant. But that mourning was short-lived, replaced instantly by a pressure that was not of this dimension, nor of any single reality. It was a pressure that tasted of absolute zero and blinding white judgment. Vegeta stood amidst the stardust and floating debris of what was once a destroyer's planet, his chest heaving, his fists still smoking with the violet residue of a god-killing strike. He did not look triumphant. He looked up. Above him, the fabric of space tore open not once, but 11 times. They did not arrive with the chaotic roar of Saiyans or the destructive pulse of Hakaishins. They arrived in silence, a deafening, heavy silence that pressed the air out of Vegeta's lungs. 11 pillars of light, ranging from teal to indigo, pierced the void, forming a perfect circle around the lone Saiyan. The Grand Priest had not come to negotiate. He had sent the siblings. The remaining angels descended with faces of porcelain neutrality, their staffs gleaming with a cold, terrifying lust for erasure. This was not a tournament. This was an extermination. To witness the moment a mortal challenges the architects of reality, tether your soul to this timeline and ignite the algorithm, for if we look away, the legend of the God Killer vanishes into the void. Space did not mourn the death of the angel, it merely recoiled, a violent contraction of the cosmic fabric that sent shudders through dimensions unseen by mortal eyes. The vacuum where Whis had existed only moments ago was now a scar, a jagged, impossible wound in the ether that refused to close. Vegeta stood on the fracturing crust of a dead moon, his chest heaving like a forged bellows, the silver blood of a deity drying on his knuckles. He did not feel triumph. The thrill of the kill, usually a roaring fire in his Saiyan blood, was absent. Instead, there was only a cold, creeping realization that he had not just broken a rule. He had broken the spine of the universal order. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against his eardrums with the weight of an ocean. It was the silence of a courtroom before the gavel falls. Then, the stars began to bleed. High above the debris field, the darkness turned a bruised, violent violet, tearing open to reveal a blinding white interior. It was not a portal, it was an incision. From that blinding aperture, they descended. Not one, not two. 11 columns of pristine, sterile light hammered down into the void, encircling the solitary prince. The light did not radiate heat. It radiated absolute, terrifying authority. As the pillars faded, they revealed the architects of that authority. They hovered in a perfect ring, their pale skin glowing with bioluminescent faintness against the black backdrop of space, their white hair drifting in an atmosphere that did not exist. The angels. The siblings of the fallen. Vegeta straightened his back, his vertebrae cracking with the effort to stand tall under the sudden, crushing increase in gravitational pressure. This was not the chaotic, crushing gravity of a black hole, nor the aggressive, heavy key of a destroyer. This was the weight of purity. It felt as though the universe itself was rejecting his presence, demanding he kneel or cease to exist. He looked from face to face. There was Korn, with his sharp, analytical gaze. Mojito, with a smirk of detached amusement. Vados, her expression unreadable, a mask of porcelain sorrow that held no warmth. They did not speak. They did not It was fundamental. They were the white blood cells of the multiverse, and he was the pathogen. Vegeta clenched his fists, and the violet aura of his ultra ego now twisted and darkened into something far more ancient flared to life. But even his aura seemed to hesitate, flickering against the overwhelming brilliance of the 11 divine signatures surrounding him. He could feel their ki, a humming resonance that vibrated in his teeth. It was a perfect harmony, a song of existence that had no place for a discordant note like him. For the first time since he was a child trembling at the feet of Frieza, Vegeta felt the distinct, icy prickle of impossibility. He was not fighting warriors. He was fighting the laws of physics. He was fighting the concept of end itself. Korn raised his staff. The movement was slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly graceful. The gem atop the staff glowed with a light that hurt to look at the light of erasure. Vegeta of Universe 7. Korn said, his voice echoing not in the air, but directly inside Vegeta's skull. Your existence has been deemed a paradox. We do not seek vengeance. We seek correction. Correction, Vegeta growled, the familiar heat of defiance finally sparking in his gut, overriding the awe. He lowered his stance, the ground beneath him turning to magma under the pressure of his rising power. You talk of me like I'm a mistake on a ledger, but I am the one who killed the untouchable. I am the one who made the immortal bleed. He bared his teeth, a feral grin splitting his face as the adrenaline of the hunted flooded his system. Come then, he roared, the sound shattering the unnatural silence. Correct me if you can. The 11 halos flared in unison. The light of the stars vanished, replaced entirely by the blinding brilliance of the angels. They did not charge. They simply vanished from sight, moving faster than the flow of time itself. The universe did not explode into chaos. It imploded into precision. Vegeta had spent years training under Whis, learning to move without thought, to let his body react before his mind could interfere. He knew the sensation of ultra instinct, the fluidity of water, the calmness of a still lake, but this was not a lake. This was a tsunami of absolute order. The first blow did not register as a punch. It felt as though gravity itself had suddenly decided to fold Vegeta's ribcage inward. He was launched backward, crashing through the jagged spine of a floating mountain, rock turning to vapor upon contact with his skin. Before his back hit the vacuum on the other side, 3 staffs were already there, waiting. Clack, clack, clack. The sounds were sickeningly polite, sharp, wooden reports that echoed in the marrow of his bones. One struck his left shoulder, dislocating it with surgical efficiency. Another swept his legs, shattering the tibia. The third tip drove into his solar plexus, not piercing the skin, but sending a shockwave of paralyzing numbness through his nervous system. Vegeta gasped, a spray of blood misting the void. But before he could even register the pain, he was elsewhere. Kicked? Blasted? No, he had been redirected. Mojito had caught him mid-flight, spinning him with the tip of his boot like a top, passing him to Cuss, who slammed him downward with a jovial, terrifying giggle. He slammed into the crust of the dead moon, burying deep into the bedrock. The impact created a crater 10 miles wide, but the dust didn't have time to settle. Above him, the sky was a lattice of weaving light. They were moving in a pattern so complex, it looked like a kaleidoscope of death. They didn't communicate, they didn't signal. They flowed around each other like liquid mercury, a seamless, terrifying machine of 11 parts acting as one. Vegeta tried to push himself up, his vision swimming in red and violet. Too fast! His mind roared, panic clawing at the edges of his focus. They aren't attacking openings, they are creating them. He managed to raise a forearm, just as Margarita descended, her staff descending like a guillotine. The wood met his arm, and the force was not physical, it was conceptual. It felt heavy, like the weight of a guilty conscience. The ground beneath him fractured, turning to powder, and Vegeta's knees buckled. Submit, Margarita whispered, her voice devoid of the playful tone she used to have. Return to the void. Never, Vegeta snarled, forcing his ki to explode outward. A pillar of purple, destruction energy erupted from his core, a desperate omnidirectional blast meant to clear the board. It should have incinerated everything within a light year. Instead, the angels simply adjusted. They didn't block. They didn't dodge. They merely shifted their existence slightly to the left or right, allowing the destructive torrent to pass harmlessly between them. It was humiliating. His rage, his power, his god-killing potential to them, it was just a breeze to be stepped around. The blast faded, leaving Vegeta panting, kneeling in the center of the crater. His armor was shattered, hanging off him in jagged shards. His breath came in ragged hitches. Around the rim of the crater, the 11 figures touched down gently, their boots making no sound. They were perfectly clean. Not a speck of dust, not a drop of sweat. Grand Priest's children looked down at him with the dispassionate gaze of scientists observing a failed experiment. He retains his will, Korn observed, adjusting his glasses. The corruption is deep. Merus was correct. The Saiyan spirit, illogical. It is messy, Vados added, her voice carrying a trace of disappointment. We saw potential in this mess. Look where it led him. Vegeta laughed. It was a wet, broken sound, bubbling up from a chest filled with blood. He placed one hand on his knee and forced himself to stand. His legs trembled, threatening to give out, but he locked them straight. He wiped the blood from his chin, smearing it across his face like war paint. The pain was excruciating. Good. The humiliation was burning. Even better. He looked at the pristine, glowing circle of executioners. He saw their perfection. He saw their flawlessness. And in that perfection, he finally saw it. The trap of divinity. They were so used to being the hammer, they had forgotten what it was like to be the nail. They had never had to struggle to breathe. They had never had to claw their way out of a grave. Vegeta's aura flared again, but this time, the violet flame was darker, laced with veins of obsidian black. The God Killer energy he had absorbed from Whis began to churn in his gut, reacting to the proximity of the other angels. It was hungry. You call this messy? Vegeta wheezed, his grin widening, showing teeth stained red. He cracked his neck, the sound loud in the stillness. You call this corruption? He took a step forward, limping, yet advancing toward Vados. I call it evolution. The air around him began to distort. The temperature dropped. The angels stiffened, their staffs raising in unison. For the first time, the perfect synchronization faltered. A microsecond of hesitation. They sensed it. The frequency of his ki had changed. He wasn't just emitting power anymore. He was vibrating with the same frequency as their staffs. Vados moved first. It was not a charge, nor a feint. It was a simple, fluid glide across the broken vacuum, closing the distance between godhood and mortality in the blink of an eye. She did not look like a warrior. She looked like a conductor stepping onto a podium, her staff raised not to strike, but to silence a discordant note. You have suffered enough, Vegeta, she said, her voice soft, carrying a terrifying gentleness. Rest now. Return to the nothingness from which you came. The gem atop her staff flared a blinding, absolute white. This was not the destructive energy of a Hakaishin, which broke matter down into sand. This was angelic eradication. It was the command of the editor deleting a sentence from the story of time. It was the whiteout of existence. A beam of pure, holy negation fired point blank into Vegeta's chest. The universe seemed to inhale. The light swallowed the Saiyan whole. There was no explosion, no shockwave, just a column of absolute brilliance that connected heaven to earth, erasing everything within its radius. The other angels watched with lowered staffs, their faces impassive. The correction was complete. The glitch was patched. But the light did not fade. Instead, it began to curdle. Deep within the blinding white pillar, a shadow writhed. The pristine energy of creation, which should have unmade Vegeta's atoms and scrubbed his soul from the afterlife, began to swirl like water down a drain. It wasn't dispersing, it was being drank. The column of light collapsed inward, sucked violently into a central point. There stood Vegeta, his armor gone, his upper body bare and smoking. But he was not erased. His skin glowed with a strange, oily sheen, a translucent film of violet energy that pulsed like a second heartbeat. The eradication energy rippled across his chest, sizzling like water on a hot skillet, before sinking beneath his skin. Vados' eyes, usually narrow and serene, widened by a fraction of a millimeter. For an angel, it was the equivalent of a scream. Impossible, Korn whispered, his staff drifting slightly out of alignment. The frequency... he is rejecting the command. Vegeta looked down at his own hands, turning them over slowly. He flexed his fingers, and sparks of white lightning, angelic lightning crackled between his knuckles, instantly turned purple by his own aura. He hadn't just survived the erasure, he had digested it. The realization hit him like a physical blow, followed immediately by a rush of euphoria so intense it made him dizzy. The energy he had absorbed from Whis during their final fatal duel had not just given him power, it had rewritten his biological code. He was no longer a being of pure matter. He was a hybrid of destruction and divinity,
A closed loop of energy that the angel's holy light could not penetrate. They were trying to drown a fish. I see, Vegeta murmured, the sound vibrating with a heavy, distorted reverb. He looked up at Vados, and for the first time, the predator in the equation changed. You can't delete me. I'm not in your file anymore. Vados, driven by a flicker of genuine alarm, thrust her staff forward again, aiming to impale him physically if the energy wouldn't work. It was a strike faster than thought, a move that had humbled gods of destruction for eons. Vegeta didn't dodge. He didn't block. He caught it. His hand snapped up, fingers closing around the shaft of the divine staff just inches from the glowing orb. The impact created a shockwave that cracked the moon beneath them in half, sending massive tectonic plates drifting into space. But Vegeta didn't budge. He held the staff in a vice grip, his dark violet aura bleeding into the sacred wood, corrupting its white glow with veins of black. Vados tugged, attempting to recall the weapon. It didn't move. The absolute leverage of an angel was nullified by the sheer, brute force anchor of Vegeta's will. Let go, Vados commanded, her voice losing its melodic composure, sharpening into a threat. You speak of order, Vegeta growled, leaning in close. His face was inches from hers, his eyes burning with a calm, horrific intensity. The heat radiating off him was warping the space between them. You speak of balance, but you forgot one thing about Saiyans, Vados. The staff began to groan, a high-pitched, whining sound, like a dying star. Cracks appeared in the smooth, indestructible wood, spider-webbing down the shaft. We evolve as we fight. Vegeta's grip tightened. His bicep bulged, veins protruding like steel cables. He channeled the stolen erasure energy back into his arm, mixing it with his own destruction key. Crack! The sound was louder than any explosion. It was the sound of a fundamental law being broken. The angel's staff, the symbol of their neutrality and authority, shattered in Vegeta's grip. Splinters of holy wood and shards of the divine gem exploded outward, glittering like diamond dust in the void. Vados stumbled back, clutching her empty hands, her halo flickering violently. The connection was severed. For the first time in millions of years, she looked vulnerable. The other 10 angels froze. The perfect circle was broken. The geometry of their dominance had collapsed. Vegeta tossed the broken handle aside, the wood disintegrating into purple ash before it left his hand. He stepped over the line where Vados had stood, his shadow stretching long and dark over the divine siblings. Now, Vegeta said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper, "Who's next?" The hierarchy of the cosmos is built on a simple, unspoken assumption. The angels are the untouchable observers, and the rest of existence is merely the performance they watch. But as Vados retreated, her hands shaking, that assumption dissolved into the cold vacuum. The script had been burned. Vegeta did not wait for them to recalibrate. He launched himself from the debris of the moon, moving with such explosive velocity that the space behind him warped into a funnel of distorted light. He was no longer fighting like a martial artist. He was fighting like a natural disaster. The remaining 10 angels reacted instantly, their cohesion fraying into desperate, individual survival instincts. Korn and Mojito intercepted him first, their staffs crossing to form a temporal barrier, a wall of solidified time meant to freeze the Saiyan in a single moment for all eternity. It was a technique that would have stopped Jiren, Broly, or even Beerus in their tracks. Vegeta didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He crashed into the temporal wall with his shoulder, his aura screaming as it chewed through the magic. The God Killer energy within him, now spiked with the flavor of Vados erasure, acted as a universal solvent. He shattered the time barrier like a pane of glass, the shards of frozen moments glittering around him as he broke through to the other side. Mojito's smirk vanished. Before the Angel of Universe 9 could teleport away, Vegeta was inside his guard. The prince didn't strike with a fist. He reached out with an open claw, his hand enveloped in a dense, swirling shroud of black-violet ki. He bypassed the staff, bypassed the defensive barriers, and clamped his hand around Mojito's throat. The momentum carried them both crashing into a floating asteroid. The impact pulverized the rock instantly, leaving them suspended in a cloud of dust. Mojito thrashed, firing beams of holy light from his eyes, burning holes through Vegeta's shoulder armor, searing the flesh beneath. Vegeta ignored the pain. He was focused on the prize. "You look at us and see insects," Vegeta whispered, his voice a guttural grinding of tectonic plates. He brought his other hand up, fingers hooking around the glowing blue ring floating around Mojito's neck. "But you forgot what insects do to a corpse." Mojito's eyes went wide.
filled with a terror that an angel should not be capable of feeling. He realized too late that Vegeta wasn't trying to kill him. He was trying to unplug him. "Stop," Korn shouted, diving forward, but he was too slow. Vegeta pulled. The sound was not of metal bending or wood snapping. It was a sound like a choir suddenly being silenced by a gunshot. A high-pitched, crystalline shatter that resonated in the soul of every living being in the galaxy. The halo broke. The perfect circle snapped in Vegeta's grip, fracturing into 3 jagged arcs of solid light.
Mojito let out a silent scream, his body seizing as his connection to the angelic realm was violently severed. He went limp, his skin turning a dull, lifeless gray as his divinity leaked out of him. But the light from the broken halo did not dissipate. It spilled out like glowing blood, thick and radiant, pooling in the vacuum. Vegeta didn't let it go to waste. He opened his mouth and inhaled. The vacuum of space aided him, but it was his own voracious spiritual hunger that did the work. The fragments of the halo and the spilling liquid light were drawn into his maw in a stream of blinding white fire. He swallowed the essence of the angel. The reaction was instantaneous. Vegeta threw his head back and roared, a sound that transcended sound. His violet aura exploded outward, but now the core of the flame was a blinding, pure white. The veins in his neck and face bulged, glowing with the ingested light. His muscles expanded, tearing the remnants of his bodysuit, reshaping themselves under the influx of divine power. He was metabolizing their holiness, converting their neutrality into raw, unadulterated aggression. When he looked back down at the remaining 9 angels, his eyes had changed. The pupils were gone. His irises were now pools of swirling, galaxy-colored light purple, red, and blinding white. He dropped Mojito's unconscious, graying body into the void like a used wrapper. 1. Vegeta counted, his voice layering over itself, sounding like a legion. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced the hearts of the siblings. They had come to exterminate a pest, only to realize they were locked in a cage with a predator that ate the exterminators. Formation, Korn screamed, abandoning his calm demeanor. "Seal the dimension! Do not let him feed." The angels scattered, raising their staffs to create a containment box, a geometric prison of light to trap the monster. But they were moving with fear now, and fear made them slow. Fear made them predictable. Vegeta vanished. He reappeared behind Kukatail Universe 5, his speed now enhanced by the very light he had just consumed. He didn't bother with a speech this time. He was efficient. A backhand blow shattered Kukatail's staff, and before the angel could recover, Vegeta's hand was already on the halo. Snap. Another scream of dying light, another feast. Vegeta ripped the halo free and crushed it in his fist, absorbing the burst of energy through his skin. He was getting faster with every kill. Stronger. The sheer, intoxicating rush of it was overriding his Saiyan rationality, pushing him into a state of euphoric madness. He was becoming a black hole in the shape of a man. He turned toward the remaining cluster of angels, licking his lips. The light of 2 divine beings burned inside him, demanding more fuel. "Who wants to be part of me?" he asked, his grin stretching too wide, his teeth glowing white. "Who wants to live forever?" Fear is a mortal contraction. It is the shivering of the prey before the predator. But what the angels felt in that collapsing sector of space was not fear. It was obsolescence. They were watching the end of their era, not written in a scroll or decreed by Zeno, but carved out by the blood-soaked hands of a mortal who refused to die. The remaining siblings broke formation. The hive mind shattered into terrified fragments. Martinu, the stout angel of Universe 1, attempted to flee, warping space to fold herself into a pocket dimension of safety. She never made it. Vegeta did not chase her. He simply occupied the space she intended to go. He was already there, waiting in the fold of reality, his smile burning through the dark. A single chop of his hand severed her connection to the physical plane. He tore the halo from her fading form with the casual violence of a storm stripping leaves from a branch. The light of 3. The consumption triggered a chain reaction. Vegeta's speed ceased to be a measurement of distance over time. He became a ubiquity. He was everywhere at once, a blurred horizon of violet and blinding white. To the remaining angels, he appeared as a strobe light of destruction flickering into existence only long enough to snap a staff, crush a throat, or shatter a halo. Korn screamed commands that no one followed. "Link your cords!" Fuse the lattice, but there was no lattice left. There was only the hunt. Campari fell, his staff broken over Vegeta's knee. Hawamo tried to negotiate, raising his hands in surrender, only to have his halo bitten directly off his neck, his plea silenced by the crunch of divine light being masticated. The sound was wet and electric, echoing in the vacuum like thunder in a canyon. Vegeta was no longer fighting, he was feasting. The sensation was beyond euphoria. It was a rewrite of his soul. Every halo he crushed and swallowed added a new layer of dimensional awareness to his mind. He could see the timelines branching out like veins. He could hear the heartbeat of the multiverse. He felt the panic of the Kais in the upper realms and the shivering of destroyers in their sleep. He was becoming the apex point of Universe 7, a singularity of power that bowed to no king. Sour, cognac, cuss. They fell in rapid succession, their lights extinguished, their bodies left drifting as gray, empty husks in the dark. Finally, only Korn remained, the eldest of the siblings floating amidst the graveyard of his kin. The debris field was no longer just rock. It was littered with the shattered remains of staffs and the drifting, colorless bodies of the fallen. Korn trembled, his staff held in shaking hands, the tip pointing waveringly at the monster floating 10 meters away. Vegeta hovered in a cross-legged meditative pose, drifting casually through the carnage. He looked terrifyingly serene. His armor was gone, replaced by a coating of pure energy that shifted between the deep purple of destruction and the iridescent white of the angels. His hair was a flowing mane of starlight, and his skin possessed the density of a neutron star. "You are an abomination," Korn whispered, tears of pure mercury leaking from his eyes. "You have consumed the children of the great minister. Do you think this power comes without a cost? You have swallowed the sun, Saiyan. It will burn you from the inside." Vegeta opened his eyes. The universe seemed to dim in response. His eyes held no pupils, no irises, only swirling galaxies of raw power. "I am not burning," Vegeta said. His voice was no longer a single tone, it was a chorus. It carried the resonance of the 11 angels he had consumed, layered over the gravelly baritone of the prince. "I am finally warm." He stood up, unfolding from his seated position. The movement sent a ripple through the fabric of space that knocked Korn backward. "You speak of cost," Vegeta continued, drifting forward. He didn't use speed this time. He drifted slowly, inevitably, like the coming of old age. "The cost of your perfection was stagnation. You served a balance that kept us weak. I have simply reallocated the resources." Korn let out a scream of despair and thrust his staff forward, pouring every ounce of his remaining life force into a final beam of judgment. It was a strike meant to unmake a galaxy. Vegeta raised one hand. He caught the beam in his palm. He didn't struggle. He didn't strain. He simply closed his fingers. The beam crumpled, shattered, and vanished. Vegeta reached out, his hand gently cupping Korn's face. The angel froze, paralyzed by the sheer proximity of such overwhelming energy. "Tell your father," Vegeta whispered, leaning in until his forehead touched the angel's, "that the nursery is closed." With a sudden, violent jerk, Vegeta ripped the final halo free. Korn gasped, his eyes rolling back as he slumped into unconsciousness, joining his siblings in the drift. Vegeta crushed the 12th halo. The explosion of light was blinding, a supernova contained within the palm of a hand. He brought it to his lips and inhaled the final piece of the puzzle. The transformation settled. The violent swirling of his aura calmed into a steady, rhythmic pulse. White, purple, white, purple. A heartbeat of dual natures, perfectly fused. Vegeta stood alone in the silence. The wreckage of the angelic strike force floated around him, a ring of broken gods. He felt the power coursing through him, infinite and terrible. He was immune to erasure. He was fueled by destruction. He was the God Killer. Slowly, deliberately, Vegeta tilted his head back. He looked past the stars, past the galaxies, piercing the veil of the universe itself to gaze into the null realm where the Palace of All stands. He focused his vision, narrowing it until he found the signature he was looking for. A blue-skinned, diminutive figure with a halo that outshone all others. Vegeta smiled. It was a cold, sharp expression, promising war. "I'm waiting," he said to the void. The stars burned quietly, as if afraid to make a sound. The Prince of all Saiyans had become the king of the empty sky.